Okay, we're ready to start. Welcome to Jazz at the Library. Thank you for coming. I see new faces, which is always great. Jazz at the Library is a joint kind of project of Jazz Fresno, nonprofit organization that promotes jazz in the Valley through education and performance, and the Fresno County Libraries. So it's our joint project, and we want to thank CMAC for coming in and taping this and making it available to our community. So thank you again for that. Before I introduce our presenter tonight, just a few announcements. First, I wanted to mention that normally the Jazz at the Library is the third Tuesday, but next month it's going to be on June 24th, not on the 17th. And Albert Alva, who is the director of big bands at Chapman College, is coming in. He's going to talk about the title is The Tough Tenors. So and of course there'll be live music. So be here for that. Now, in between that, I want to call really something really important that Jazz Fresno is doing. We have, as a part of Jazz Fresno, what's called Milestones Youth Jazz Workshop. And right now, or it's starting on the 16th through the 21st, there's a summer jazz camp. And I want to announce two really important performances that are kind of a part, thank you, Joe, that are a part of that, so that on Tuesday night, the 17th, Billy Hart and his quartet is going to be playing. Both of these performances are at the new refurbished Bullard High School Theater. So it should be really nice. So that's going to be 7 o'clock on the 17th. Billy Hart, and as a part of that quartet is Ethan Iverson, who is a very, very highly respected pianist and a member of the Bad Plus. Then on Wednesday night, Bob Mincer and his quartet, is going to be there with his quartet, and Bob, as is our presenter tonight, is on the faculty of the USC Thornton School of Music. So that is going to be Wednesday, the 18th, again at 7 o'clock, again at Bullard High School Theater. So you can go online to Milestones, to Jazz Fresno, and you could get tickets through brown paper ticket if you want to. So this is really high level music that I would encourage you to take advantage of. So with that, my pleasure to introduce Frank Potenza, who is our presenter for tonight, coming up from USC. He is chair of the Department of Studio Jazz Guitar at the Thornton School of Music at USC. He is an educator, he's a composer, he's an arranger, and he has 9 solo CDs to his credit. He has written a number of texts for the Thornton Guitar Instructional Series, and at the convocation for the Thornton School of Music in 2009, he received the Dean's Faculty Award for Excellence in Teaching. Frank has played with a number of really well-known jazz artists. I'll name a few: Dizzy Gillespie, Bill Watrous, Joe Sample, among others. And from 1996 to 1999, he toured with the Grammy award-winning pianist Gene Harris, and played such gigs, as the Blue Note in New York, played in Chicago, played at the Jazz Alley in Seattle. So it's my pleasure to introduce Frank Potenza.
Thank you. Thank you. That was the most detailed introduction I've ever had, and he memorized all that. I kept looking for a teleprompter, but he memorized. Thank you so much, Tom. I need you to help me with something. Can we have a round of applause for you? thank you so much for coming out and supporting live jazz. Jazz Fresno seems to be a really vibrant jazz community, and I, for one, appreciate that. Lucky you. And you have a lot going on here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because it would be redundant. The story of how this film came about is kind of told in the film. So rather than be an emissary from the Department of Redundancy Department, one of my favorites, I'm just going to roll the film, and then if you have questions of me after, I'll be happy to answer the questions. If we have some time, I'll play a few things, and we'll all go out for pizza. So this is called I'm Not So Average Joe, and it's basically about the making of this CD, which by a very odd coincidence is available for purchase here tonight at the back of the room. So if you want to take some music home with you, we can help you with that, and let's play the film. No. Any questions? Now, I talk fast. I realize that, and my wife, the first time she saw this, said, a lot of it goes by without me really being able to understand what you said, so.
I would like to have heard those charts. I mean, everything you do is fabulous, but it would have been really nice if you had those charts and you played through it from beginning to end. I think that would have really been the whipped cream on the cake.
I kind of agree. This is,
No, I know.
my concept of what was going to happen here was completely like clueless. This all came about because Daley met me somewhere and came up and asked, well, actually he had done a documentary on the photographer, the guy who was doing the still photography. So I participated in that as somebody who was interviewed, and then I wound up doing some source music for them to use in the underpinning of the film. And so that's kind of how I got to know Daley. And then when I told him I was doing this project, he conceptualized this whole documentary film idea, which was nothing I expected to happen. So the way it unfolded was rather sort of a surprise to me as far as how everything went. And you know, there are issues when you use music in terms of you have to pay a mechanical royalty and you have to pay a synchronization license if you use music in a film. So if you used every tune that we had done, all 10 tunes, that would have been a kind of an expensive tab as far as the sync rights and all of that stuff. So that got, that's a good example of something that I didn't know anything about any of that. That's just something I'd never really thought much about, but it turned out to be something in the way of an issue as far as how many tunes we were going to use in the film, because he shot. I mean, we recorded for 2 days, like 4 or 5 hours each day. So that's a lot of footage. So, I mean, just the fact that, again, from my point of view, for what he had in terms of a pile of video, I can't imagine trying to kind of make that into something that's coherent and a film at all anyway. So for me, it was like, I kind of just enjoyed watching the whole thing unfold. But I had very little input in certain parts of it, and there were parts of it where he would ask me something, and it was kind of a strange place to be put in to answer the question, because it's just something that I hadn't really thought too much about doing ever. So it was a real learning process for me especially.
Very enjoyable.
Thank you. Okay, is that it? That's it for the questions?
How much time had elapsed between the time when you told the story about Boylston Street in Boston and taking the lesson with the holes in the shoe and the play? I mean, had a long time gone by in between playing of like those couple of tunes and this recording session?
Yeah, basically I met Joe in 1974, so that was that story about going to Boylston Street and going to see him play. So, and then he passed in '94, so that was the 20 years that I knew him. And then this record was recorded in 2012, the end of 2012, the original sessions. And then the following, it just took a while to do the post-production and the this and the that and the mastering, and it's just like you can make a record in a reasonably short amount of time. Like we basically did this in 2 days as far as the basic recordings, but then the post-production in some cases had to be postponed because either a studio was unavailable or I was unavailable or for whatever reason. It's just, delays happen, and it took a lot longer to get it to the point where it was finished. But did I answer your question there? Basically, from what we were talking about in 1974, that was the very beginning of when I took the lesson and he bought the shoes with my money. And then, yeah, so 20 years later, he passed, and then this much later than that. So by the time you get done with all of the math, it's something like close to 50 years after he did that first record that's called For Django. How many people in the room have ever heard the For Django album? Okay. All right, so I mean, that's like an uber classic. That is like a guitar classic if there ever was one. And the story that I had told in Denver was I was getting ready to play For Django, which is one of the pieces that we did from that record. And I told the story, which is told on the liner notes. And I usually don't tell you that because I'm trying to make you buy the record. But basically, he was supposed to do a record date with the Modern Jazz Quartet. And I was at his house. He mentioned that to me, and he said he was thinking about taking his tune For Django to this record date, which I thought was a great idea because John Lewis was going to bring Django, and they were going to do these tunes. And So he said, and it's been so long since I played that, I forget it, and I don't have a lead sheet for it. Could you make me a lead sheet for it? Right? And I didn't even have the record. So he gave me his vinyl. I took it home. I transcribed it and brought him a lead sheet to take to the session, and then the session never happened for some reason. The record date got canceled, or something went wrong. But that's where I wound up with that lead sheet, and that's how I learned that tune, and that was the story that I told. And that's kind of what started this whole thing as far as my making Tom Burns, who's the president of Capri Records, aware of that this would be something. And his eyes just lit up. He said, could we do that? It's like, yes. So that's how that all started.
To me, this fits in, it's so well done, it fits in like a public television kind of music segment.
Uh-huh.
My question to you is, those 2 days of recording sessions, in your experience, was it difficult for you, compared to other sessions you've had? It looked like in the beginning there you were having to be like a little patient with them. So maybe you could shed some light.
That's so out of character for me being patient at all, huh? Ask my wife or my students. It was, if you've ever been in a recording studio, it's not exactly the most warm, conducive to feeling, it's very tense. It can be very tense, right? And if you've done it a lot, then you get used to it and it's like anything else, right? But, so just to go and to record is one level of pressure, all right? And then to be producing the record is another level of pressure, and Tom couldn't make it for the session, so I was the producer. And so there's that, which is I'm still comfortable with. What I wasn't prepared for was that you could see that we were in kind of a not very big room, John and I, and then we had ISO for bass and drums, so they were in their own booth, but we all had eye contact, right? What I didn't bargain for was that I was going to have Daly orbiting me with this thing with the camera on it that kind of looked like a sort of a bicycle or something that supports the camera, and it's got two handles, and he's just kind of lurking on me while I'm playing. And then there's Bob Barry, who's another, and he's taking still photographs, right? So it's not as though you don't have enough going on with trying to do what you're doing. You have these two people orbiting you at close range, which was very distracting. And I kind of swore that I wasn't ever going to really tell this story, but since you asked, that was the most brain damage for me. Just getting used to the fact that I had these people lurking on me that I really just wasn't ready to, you know what I mean? So, I mean, what you see as far as my dealing with, we had a few false starts and stuff like that. I mean, they were kind of looking at some of this stuff for the first time, and I wrote pretty detailed arrangements compared to the way Joe did that record in 1964, which was, yeah, let's play this tune, and he and John kind of had pretty much it worked out in their head, but they didn't have written out stuff with a very specific number of bars and do this 3 times and an ending and all of that stuff. So I got way more into like having this stuff on paper so that I knew I kind of could control the environment a lot more. But, it turned into a bit of an issue in terms of just getting some of that going because, again, the clock is ticking and you only have a certain amount of time to do this. And you got 10 tunes and you want to get them done in 2 days, and it's like, you know, and you got the people orbiting you and distracting you and all that stuff. So it took me a good, well, the best indicator I had of that I was not being good at hiding that distraction was Bob eventually came up to me after about 30 minutes and he said, Frank, try to think of us as two enormous flies on the wall. And that helped because we all laughed, and I thought, okay, yeah, I have to figure out a way to shake this off because it's like, if this distracts me this way, I'm not going to get anything done for the hunt. So that basically was what kind of broke the ice and kind of made me able to. I forgot they were there after a while, but for the first 30 minutes, I guess I just kept repeating to myself, what did I do to myself by agreeing to this?
You know, that, what was the tune that was played at the Long Beach City?
Cherokee.
Cherokee?
Ray Noble's Cherokee. Which, you never heard the melody. And actually, in that arrangement, we never really played the arrangement to Cherokee because it was some kind of wacky thing that George, the conductor guy there, who was the director of the music program at Long Beach City College, is still a dear friend of mine. And he had done some kind of screwy arrangement called Jonathan Gill or something, and it took the very Indian aspect of Cherokee, and the introduction had that dum 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 kind of sort of Indian thing, and then there was this whole head that was a transcription of a Charlie Parker solo or something like that, and you never heard any of that. That was the part that the big band played. But the segment that they extracted was when Joe and I were just sort of playing with the rhythm section, and then George had the whole band, including the rhythm section, just lay out, and we just played together for a while. So we did that on a blues and on Cherokees, but yeah, the tune is Cherokee.
Good.
Thank you.
At the very end, there was some tune from Tchaikovsky, right?
Oh, yeah. It's Sugar Plum Fairy. But the actual recording of that, which I wasn't familiar with, that was chosen by Daly, who made the film, and it's called Sugar Plum Gypsy because it's done in the gypsy sort of Django style.
Who plays the fiddle on that?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, I'm not prepared to answer that, but if you look up Sugar Plum Gypsy and find out what the band is, it's actually on the closing credits there that you could find out, and I'm sorry I'm not prepared to answer that because I hate not being able to give people credit that played on recordings or wrote the songs or all that stuff. That's kind of a pet obsession of mine. If I play something, I like to be able to let people know what I'm playing and why and where it came from and who wrote it and why I like it and whatever.
Can you play for us, please?
I'm sorry, we're out of time. All right, so now, I mean, I could play a lot of different things and I could take requests or whatever, but I am trying to interest you in taking some of this music home. So maybe I'll play a few things from the record first and then we'll see what we have time for, okay? Can you excuse me while I tune? At least you don't have to listen to it. Okay.
Sure. This is going to be on the 18th. On the 18th, he's going to perform. 18th, 7 o'clock, Bullard High School Theater.
So that's exactly the same version that's on that record. More or less. So a couple of the other things that I did want to get to from that. This one is the tune that I talked about in the film. Joe wrote this as a tribute to Django, and it's again something that a lot of guitar players know this, and I actually even know people other than guitarists that play this and then enjoy it as a tune. So Joe recorded it as wrote it and recorded it as a waltz, a jazz waltz. It's a beautiful jazz waltz. And just because I just kind of wanted to do something different with it, rather than just, do exactly the same treatment that we did, because I mentioned on the film there was the one rumba thing that's called Fleur de Nuit, and pardon my French. But they did that on the record, and Collins began it with this kind of thing with his hands on the drums that I just thought was a really kind of cool rumba thing. And I didn't want to live without that, so we did that pretty much the same way. For this, my original idea, because of the trying to do some kind of a different treatment, my original idea was a tango, because I thought I liked the title Tango for Django, right? Because it's originally called For Django. And then he recorded it with the NDR Big Band, and they called it Waltz for Django, and it's the same thing, basically the same treatment in 3. So I wanted to do it in a different meter, and we tried, in the session, we tried tango a little bit, and it just kind of wasn't taking off. So as the producer, I had to make the judgment that, all right, this isn't working, plan B, and I said, what about this, what about that? And finally we settled on just bossa, so I wound up doing it as a bossa nova. So I'll play the first part of it out of time, but this is Joe's For Django. Thank you.
That table is for sale. We also have an e-newsletter. In fact, we would encourage you to sign up